Hey everyone, Zach Mason here. Welcome to my channel where we discuss everything from biblical prophecy to current events and see how they are lining up. Along those lines, we have had a lot of discussions on this channel about dreams and visions that Christians are having. And I am making this video because I've had another prophetic dream. Last night, or I should say this morning, sorry. I woke up and I had a pretty long dream about the Chinese invasion that I believe is coming, and as well as living under Chinese occupation. But I had a previous dream late last year about where I was living under Russian occupation, and it was very different. I have not been as obedient to God about sharing my personal prophetic dreams with you guys. I've studied all of yours. I've studied everybody else's, and why I'm not sharing my own more, I don't know. I guess it's something I'm wrestling with God about. I just need to do it. So I'm sharing, this video is about the Russian occupation dream I had on December 30th, 2021. So yes, almost a year ago. I'm sorry. I knew it wasn't immediate, so it wasn't necessarily super time sensitive, and I've already been warning you endlessly about what's coming. So perhaps I didn't necessarily feel a sense of urgency about it. But in this video, I'm going to share with you what I dreamt in that dream, and then I'm going to do a separate video about the dream I had this morning about the Chinese occupation. There were differences. There were differences between the two that stood out to me. But I'm going to report this one to you. Now, before I jump into it, I want to share with you some criteria that you can use to determine if a dream is from God or not. And feel free to apply them to my dream, to this video itself. This is what I teach my class when I teach on dreams and visions. When someone is reporting a dream, and you're listening, the very first thing you should be doing is asking yourself, does this person show the fruit of the Spirit? And second, are they humble or are they attention seeking? Now, I cannot apply that to me on your behalf. You have to do that. For those of you, you feel free to go back and watch other videos, and you can judge for yourself. Do you feel like I'm showing the fruit of the Spirit or not? And do you feel like I have humility? And I'm not going to be perfectly humble, but you understand, I'm not. And this is what I do with others when I evaluate them. Do I feel like their motives are attention seeking or not? I can show you mine or not. I'm here out of care for people and trying to warn people. Otherwise, believe it or not, I'm kind of an introvert, and I really don't like drawing attention to myself. I really don't. As you can see, I didn't even want to share this dream, but I feel like I'm going to be, at this point, guilty before God if I don't share both of them. So that's what I'm doing, okay? The second thing I did, now that's if it's someone else's dream. If it's your own personal dream that you had, and this is the test I apply to myself, is the dream very vivid? Number one, is it very vivid? Do you feel like you're living it? Do you have a lot of emotion in it? And when you wake up, do you have a conviction that the dream was from God and that there was something you were supposed to learn from it? So if that's the case, then it may have been from God, and you probably should pay attention, especially if you have an impression from the Holy Spirit. You're supposed to pay attention to it. Now, beyond that, a dream that's from God will not conflict with biblical truth. Anything it teaches will be in line with biblical truth. Second, symbolism. The symbolism used, there may be personal symbolism that's personal to you. But in general, there's also natural symbolism and biblical symbolism. And those symbols are universally used by God in the same way, so as to not cause confusion between us. And so we can all kind of tell whether something is from God or not. So, for example, a tree is always going to be a symbol for a believer rooted in the kingdom of God, or a group of God's people rooted in the kingdom of God. Water is always going to be a symbol for God's power, And the sky is always going to be a symbol for God the Father, right? It's generally going to be a symbol for God the Father. Things like that. If you see a menorah, that means something. That's biblical, right? There's plenty of symbols that need to be universal. If you see a dream that uses symbolism in a way that doesn't match how God is typically using that symbol, that's a red flag to me. Also, the dream should be, God uses dreams and visions to warn people or teach them something important that he wants them to understand. And that's what you see in the Bible. That's how he uses them in the Bible. What you don't see is him using dreams and visions as like a pep rally, to rev people up and get the church excited for how it's going to conquer and how it's going to go do this and how it's going to pray and take territory. That's not how God uses dreams. And those communications are typically not from God. And I've thought about sharing some of those, what I would call false dreams, with you as well, to give examples of those. But this video is about this dream. Now, the last thing I'll teach here is how to present your dream. Like, if you've had a vivid dream, if you have a dream that you believe is from God, don't do what I did. Don't sit on it. Share it. I'm sharing mine. You share yours. Let's all share. You can send them to me in email too. I'd love to see them. But share it on YouTube so that everybody can see. But here's how you should report it. Don't, and I'm going to do that in this case, don't mix your interpretation with the dream. That is confusing to people, and it can color the dream, or it can change what we're supposed to understand from it, because maybe you're making a mistake with your interpretation. And as tempted as I love interpreting dreams, so I'm very tempted to do that with my own dream as I'm reporting, but I'm going to refrain. I'm going to just tell you the dream, and I'm going to try to remember every detail that I saw so that you can have access to it. And then I'm going to come back, and I'm going to tell you what I think parts of it mean and what I interpret from it. So you can, but you're free to do the same yourself and take it to the Holy Spirit and see what you see. All right, so anyways, that said, here we go. This was a long dream. There was a lot of detail in it. And a lot of that detail I didn't write down, unfortunately. But I did write down everything that I thought was pertinent. And that was, again, I'm sorry if I failed to report all the detail that I should have. But I'll try to remember everything. The very first scene, I was standing there looking, and there was this is the part that sounds a little crazy. There was these huge dinosaur feet, I think brontosaurus feet, coming down out of the sky and just crushing people. And the whole world, I mean, everybody was just running and screaming in a panic and running away and dodging, and these brontosaurus, boom, boom, just coming randomly out of nowhere. You didn't know exactly where they were going to hit. And when I say they're huge, think house size. Okay, they were the size of a two-story, a big upper middle class two-story house. Think of it that way. They were that big, crushing multiple people at once, random, and they were coming out of the sky. You couldn't see the end. It's like the leg was going up into the clouds. So it wasn't just like the foot by itself. They were crushing buildings, cars, people too. People were running. It was chaos, and there were Russian soldiers sniping people in their homes, sniping people through windows and things, and of course their yards. And this is kind of, and I had this understanding that somehow the brontosaurus feet was the work of the Russians too. Now there was multiple scenes in this dream, but that was kind of the first scene, and then I began to focus on the sniping part of it. And there was basically, I knew that we needed to put some kind of anti-thermal cream on our chests to block the sniper's ability to detect us. So that was something that people were doing, and I was looking for some cream like that so I could do it. But then the scene changed, and the chaos calmed down. And basically I saw that the Russians, they were kind of like letting us live our lives to some degree. Like nobody was being herded up aggressively. After that initial chaotic invasion type thing, it was calm. But you could see that the Russians valued hard workers, and they were moving people to live in these group homes. Like, and I was, for some reason, living in this long, simple old apartment building. It was white brick. It kind of looked like an old dorm room, like a dormitory from a college that, maybe from the 40s or 50s. And but it was a group home, and there was other people, especially other men, living in this home. And I just had this idea, I had this understanding, this impression that we were kind of being allowed to live as long as we were reporting back to these group homes. And it was kind of like they were just letting that go on, like, for a time, because they were getting ready to ship us all off, and I had this idea into slave markets, possibly, but because they weren't ready, they were just letting us live under strict supervision until they were ready for that. Changed the scene. There was a long part of the stream where I had a backpack, and I was trying to get away into a rural area, like get away from everything. But I really wanted to get to this other location, this other house where I had stored or stashed a bunch of my goods, a lot of my prep stuff. And so I was trying to find a way to sneak to that house to get my stuff so I could move it to where I was escaping to. And I kept trying all these different ways, and basically at the end, I found that it was impossible. Like, I was not able to successfully get to my goods, to the stashed goods, and I had to kind of just give them up. I wasn't able to go after them. And along those lines, I was trying to get there. I was trying to go through these kind of urban/suburban neighborhoods. The houses were, this particular neighborhood that I was in the stream that I was trying to cross to get to my stashed goods, was not a high-end neighborhood. It was kind of a poor neighborhood. It was houses. But the problem was that all of these houses had fenced-in backyards. They all had chain-link fences around their backyards that, connected to each other. So there was no way. I knew I couldn't go up the front street. Like, I couldn't go up the street in front of the houses because I'd be easily seen. But I also couldn't go through the backyards. I couldn't cut through the backyards because of the fences. I would have to jump fence after fence after fence. It was going to draw a lot of attention, make noise, and be exhausting. And it just seemed like it was going to be impossible. So, and I also felt like the people there, living there, like there was people living in every house, and they were all clueless. Like, they didn't know that they needed to get out of there. I don't know why they didn't think that, but they didn't realize they needed to leave. And I realized I felt like they were just sitting ducks. They were just sitting ducks in these houses because they were still living in an urban area, and it wasn't going to be possible for them to escape. The next major scene was like this big open air cafe slash restaurant. And there was Christians, there was groups of us Christians, and we were wanting to meet there for prayer. So there were Russian soldiers like around, standing in different places in this cafe. It was a huge cafe. I mean, this when I say open air, I mean open air. I mean, it was like just outdoor seating everywhere with booths and tables. It was really nice, and there was a stage. It was really a beautiful cafe. I don't know if it was a symbolic cafe or an actual one. I assume symbolic. But it was where the community would come together to eat. And so we Christians were wanting to meet there for prayer and to pray together and have some kind of fellowship. I guess this is the only place maybe we could do it. And I was, they were wanting to meet in larger groups, and I was going to the Christians and telling them, look, you guys need to make sure that you don't meet in groups that are larger than 7 or 8 people. So there was a bigger group, and I broke them up. I said, you guys need to have 2 groups of 7 or 8 people for security purposes. And when I checked in on one of the groups, when I went over to it, the people became supernaturally invisible. I could only see the chairs when I got closer to them. As I got closer to them, all I could see was chairs. And I realized that God was protecting them, and He was making them invisible. And I understood that as long as they were meeting in these smaller groups, that they were invisible to the occupiers. But then, as I was kind of going around and doing that, I went to visit one group up on the stage, and then I came back down. And there was this gentleman and his wife from my old church campus who were very quiet, very meek, mild-mannered people. They were not big personalities, but they were prayer warriors. Like, they were always wanting to pray for people. And they had showed up while I was gone, and they joined this one group, and they refused to listen to me. They were just quietly, like I was telling them, hey, we need to break into smaller groups, because they were encouraging all the Christians to come together and say, no, we're going to pray in power, we're going to pray together as a big group. And I was telling them, don't do that. And they just kind of sat there and looked at me and ignored me passively. Like passive resistance. Like, they were just kind of looking at me with their eyes like, they didn't have their arms crossed, but I felt their arms crossed. Like, emotionally they had their arms crossed. Like, we're not listening to you. Finish talking, and then we're just going to ignore you as soon as you're done, is kind of the attitude. They were just, I guess inside themselves, they were believing that I didn't have enough faith, that I was not having faith that they could be protected in larger groups. And, but they were no longer invisible. They were seen. They were easily seen in this larger group. I knew they were going to attract attention, and I knew they were just moments away from possibly being arrested by the occupiers. And that was pretty much where the dream ended. So, overall, I didn't like the dream. It's part of the reason I didn't share it. Didn't like the sense of loss of freedom, which, as Americans, I think all of us can understand. And it is one thing to think about a possible invasion, and it's a fantastical event. It's a catastrophic. It's something that fascinates and we want to study and talk about. But as I was living this, it became very real, and just the daily drudgery of surviving and managing every action and thinking of the consequences of every little thing you're doing was tiring. I was surprised by some things. And I also noticed some differences between this and the Chinese occupation. In general, the differences, and I'll talk again about this in the other video I do. In general, the Russians seem much more, it was initially very violent and very much a surprise. So very violent, very much a surprise, but then it calmed down, and they seemed to be fairly laid back, but not at ease. In other words, they were letting us live our life, but they were very much watching and intent on keeping security, everything calm and secure at all costs, while they made their plans or did whatever they were doing. A little different from the Chinese occupation, which didn't seem to be quite as much of a surprise. We seemed to be prepared for it a little more. I'll comment as to ideas of why, possibly, in that dream when I talk about it. And they were not, the Chinese were very much about making sure everybody followed every rule, and they were not content to let us live as we saw fit, and it was very easy to get arrested and put in a camp. And eventually it was clear they were putting everybody in camp. So the Chinese was different. But anyways, let me go back. The most curious part of this dream, because I think everything else in this dream was pretty much literal. I was literally seeing things as they would be. And that is one kind of, like when I teach on prophetic dreams and how to analyze them, a lot of people just get literal scenes, like they see literal scenes right out of the future, and sometimes they're living their life as someone else, like it's not even them, but it's literal. But other dreams are what I call literal mixed with symbolic, literal symbolic mix. So most of this dream was a literal one, but the first part of the dinosaur feet is obviously not, there's not going to be literal dinosaur feet coming out of the sky. So I would categorize that part as literal symbolic mixed. And the reason God brings symbolism sometimes into even literal scenes like that is to add teaching, is to add understanding, more detail through the image. Because an image, a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? So with one image, God can teach so much that would take so many words to explain. It seems clear the dinosaur feet coming down were bombs and missiles that were being initiated by or launched by Russians as part of their invasion. And that's what was killing people and crushing cars and buildings and etc., and why everybody was in a panic and running away. What exactly the dinosaur aspect means, I don't know for sure. There's two possibilities, or three possibilities. It could mean that the Russians are using old equipment, like these missiles are old missiles. Like maybe they're not even smart bombs. Maybe they've depleted their missiles through other wars in Europe and everything else, and they didn't have time to fabricate new ones, and that's why it's so chaotic. They're not strategically targeting anything because they don't have, these aren't smart bombs. These are just old-fashioned bombs, missiles, and they're just hitting wherever without discrimination. And that's why civilians are getting killed, chaos, buildings, cars, you name it. That would explain it, in my opinion. It could also be that the missiles are sourced from China, that China is providing them to Russia, and the symbol of China is the dragon, right? So it could be that that explains it, and that would match what I saw in another dream I reported where China was represented by this big dinosaur, this big stegosaurus type thing in the dream. But I don't know. I felt like these were brontosaurus feet, not stegosaurus feet. I guess they could have been. It didn't have a tag on it. It said brontosaurus. That's what I felt though, which they're just, brontosauruses are just big, lumbering, you don't get the idea that it's precise in any way, shape, or form. I think the people running, that's just literal. That's the chaos of the initial invasion. The Russian sniping people, that was something specific, and is a specific warning to know that when this is happening, until things have calmed down, we need to be careful wherever we go, that there could be just because the snipers were not after politicians, they were after just anybody they could see. So we need to be careful even in our own homes. The anti-thermal cream, honestly, I haven't looked that up. I don't know if that's a real thing. It makes sense in the sense that, especially at night, a Russian sniper might be using a thermal scope to detect heat. So they're firing at heat signatures, right? And if you had a cream you could put on you that was anti-thermal, it would defeat that. Now, I don't know if that cream even exists. I'm ignorant of that. I don't know. I'm going to go look it up after I get done with this and see. But I don't know if that's a literal thing that exists, and maybe that's a recommendation. Maybe we need to order anti-thermal cream, so we have it for that time. But there may be a symbolic thing there too, which I'm still thinking about. I haven't fully, if it's symbolic, I have not fully understood that one. So My apologies for not having researched that before, but I'm going to go research that and see what I think about it. Now, the chaos calmed. That tells me there is going to be, after the initial chaos, there's going to be a period of occupation where everybody is relaxing and they feel like this is the new normal. We just live under Russian occupation. And apparently many people are going to be passive about that. Like, I didn't see active resistance movements going on. It doesn't mean that they weren't going on elsewhere, but where I was, I didn't see it. While life was going on as normal, it wasn't fully going on as normal, right? Because we were moved into group homes. Like, they were doing things to show they were in control, and that were helping them get ready for possibly moving us out. But a couple of key things was the thing about people who were living in urban areas, that they were just stuck. Like, there was no way for them to really leave easily. It made me really feel like anybody living in an urban or even a heavily suburban area, you really need to think about getting some land or getting a plan to go to somebody else's house that has land in the country, in a rural area. This is something I've been saying over and over again from all the dreams and things God's been saying. But also, I took warning in that I need to make sure that before this invasion happens, anything I want to have access to goods-wise, I need to already have it there. I don't want to have it in my current residence or wherever I was before and think I'm going to be able to move it later. Apparently, I'm not going to be able to move it. So, and that Christians can and should meet together for prayer, but that we need to be security-minded and not naive in putting God to the test and asking Him to protect us in these large groups, because that's going to draw attention. You know, basically, I just took teaching from this that we'll be able to meet together, pray together, have community, but we need to keep it in, small, 7 or 8 people at a time. And specifically the prayer warrior and his wife, them showing up and doing that just showed me there's still going to be this element of the church in this time that isn't listening, and they still, even though they were so quiet and passive about their rebellion against what I was saying, I wasn't offended, like, how dare you not listen to me? I was more just concerned and trying to urge to understand. This is true. This is a principle. You cannot meet in these larger groups. You're going to get arrested. You're going to get killed. I just knew that was true, but they were refusing to trust my motives, and believed I just wasn't having faith, and they were passive in their resistance. So just because someone's not resisting actively doesn't mean that they're accepting and not rebellious, right? Anyways, I don't know what else to tell you about that dream, but that was my Russian occupation dream. Do with it what you will, and I hope you have a great day, and I hope that this is still a good bit off. This wasn't a fun time in here, but one thing that I really am keenly aware of is during this time, our reason for existing is not just to exist and survive. Our reason is to expand the kingdom, to keep praying, to keep witnessing. So that is what we're going to have to keep at the forefront of our minds, is why are we here? Why are we enduring? And it's to glorify Christ and lift His name up and draw men to Him, and women, of course. So I hope you have a great day, and let's enjoy it.